I want to begin with a moment of silence for, as most of you already know, our two lost lions, Marion Kulik and, oh, you didn't know, and Carol Gevirtz. Marion was my aunt and a second mother, and as David calls her mom to everyone, and she was his mother, but he kind of people expect other people to refer to her as mom. And we actually have an 82-year-old guy in our community who, when we were setting up the birthday parties for my wife and Marion, it was 170th birthday party last year, he kept referring to her as mom. You know, if it's okay with mom. So, she was the last surviving member of this club, the people that founded this club, Progressive Democrats back in the early 90s. And she wasn't only a superb organizer, she was also a wonderful artist. She was a painter, she was a poet, she wrote short stories, and in fact she had pretty much retired from those activities 3 to 4 years ago, and then Donald Trump got elected. And she called and she said, we gotta rev up the club again, you know. And that's what we're trying to do. And I'm happy to see as many people as we have here tonight. Most importantly, a long-term friend of hers called to express her condolences, and she said Marion was the kindest person she ever met. And she really was. I mean, she had a lot of tragedy in her life, but she said she had a happy gene, and she was always smiling, and she was always working. Carol was a former president of this club, and another tireless fighter for social justice. She battled through, I think, 3 or 4 recurrences of cancer. She was on her second one when we first moved down here in 2014, and she fought with grace and dignity and courage. And she and Marion died within 4 days of each other on the day that we were supposed to have a fundraiser for this club honoring the two of them and one other person. So as we pause to honor their memory, let's reflect on how we can best continue their work to building a more decent, caring, and equitable country. Okay, we're lucky.
June 29th.
What?
June 29th at 2 p.m.
Oh, yes, thank you. And this will be posted, I hope, it'll be on our website. We're going to try to get it on the Palm Beach County website. And it's in the newsletter, the most recent issue. June 29th is going to be a memorial in Rainbury Bay, which is where we live. And we're hoping a lot of people will turn out.
2 p.m. 2 p.m. there will be chocolate cake. In order to get in, it is a gated community. Just tell the people at the gate that you're there for Marion Kulik's memorial, and they will let you in. We've already arranged that.
Okay.
I will take care of that. We can do some business.
Okay, so we're very fortunate tonight to have Senator Berman, Lori Berman, come and talk to us about what I put on the flyer, the highlights and lowlights. And I think it points out one thing I've been saying for years, which is that it's not just Donald Trump. You know, he's like the boil that has risen to the surface. It's the Republican Party. And you hear what they've been doing here.
Okay, good evening, Democrats, and I do express my condolences about Marion and Carol, and I'm so sad that they are not with us this evening. So I do want to kind of, I think I'll do a good and ugly, because that's pretty much what it was. There were a few good things and a lot of ugly things. And then I'll take questions, because I want to hear what issues you want to hear discussed. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview. So thank you. This was my first year as a senator. As most of you know, I was a representative for 8 years before that. And this year I got to be a senator. It is definitely a much more positive place. There's only 40 senators as opposed to 120 representatives, so it's a lot more collegial. People ask me what the big difference was, and I'll tell you, when I had my bills in the House, like the first week, they all got shot down. Now, when I had my bills in the Senate, they moved forward, we had hearings, I thought things were going great, and then week 8 out of our 9 weeks, everything got shut down. So that was the big difference, but it's good at least we had some discussions about some really interesting issues, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which I've never been able to get discussions about in the Florida legislature, so that was a positive. So I'll start with the good, and then we'll get really depressed about the ugly. So the good, the Schlossberg family, Emily and Irv, have been huge advocates for a bill to prohibit texting while driving, and finally Florida became, I think, the 47th state to prohibit texting while driving. So that's a really positive, and they worked really hard on that, and I'm really happy. Unfortunately what happens is they put a Republican sponsor, and that's like the only way to get things done. When we have great ideas, they take our bill. But everybody knows, Emily was a co-sponsor, and everybody knows she was the driving force behind it, so that was great. We also passed a bill, believe it or not, we had to do it as a bill, that female prisoners can get access to feminine hygiene products. And we also passed a really good bill about domestic violence. So the bill says that if you're a victim of domestic violence, you can leave your job and get unemployment insurance, because a lot of times the women have to get leave, and then the employer is not charged, it doesn't go against them. And there's a lot of steps you have to get through to show that you are the victim of domestic violence, but that's a really good positive thing. So those were pretty much it. And those were all Democratic bills. All 3 of those were Democratic bills. The negatives. So where do I start? Okay. So we'll start with arming teachers. So that was one of the most discouraging things that happened. As you all know, we had the Parkland event last year, and we reached a compromise last year that everybody could live with. It wasn't the perfect bill, but it was a good compromise, and it said we're going to have this Guardian program, and as part of the program, someone who is not a full-time teacher could actually be armed if they voluntarily wanted to, if their school board agreed, if their sheriff agreed. And we put aside a significant chunk of money for that program, $67 million. And only $10 million of it was used, because most of the districts like Palm Beach, Broward, Dade said, we are not going to do this. We are going to have real police officers in our school. We're going to have school resource officers, people who are trained, who know what to do in a situation like this. Then we also set up this Parkland Commission, and for reasons unbeknownst to me, the commission recommended that teachers be armed. I still don't understand. I mean, you also have to recognize who was on the commission. The commission was set up. The appointees were all done by the Republicans, the governor, the Speaker of the House, the president. And they made a recommendation that teachers should be able to be armed. So now, and we fought it, and we tried so many different arguments. We tried so many different amendments to the bill, because, for instance, does that mean I'm the teacher? Do I have the gun on my person? If I have it on my person, can a student get access to it? When I go to the bathroom, what happens? Do I take it out to recess? If it's not on my person and it's locked in a box over there, am I going to be able to get access to it in the middle of a project? If the shooters in the hallway and my students are in the room, do I leave them and walk out to go take on this shooter? And interestingly, after the Scott Peterson was arrested, am I going to be arrested if I don't leave my students and go out and try and fight this person? Am I going to get paid extra because I'm acting as a police officer at this point? I mean, there were just so many issues we raised, they didn't care. They passed it. We've heard that 30 counties are going to do it. There's 67 counties in Florida, but it's all the small rural counties that are doing it. So they're still not, and we begged them for the money from last year. We said, please put it towards school police officers, and they said no. So we'll see what happens with the money for this year. It was really disturbing, and that was a big argument, but there were a lot of big arguments, unfortunately. So thanks to all of you, we passed Amendment 4, which restored rights, voting rights to felons in the state of Florida. But the legislature said, no, we thought it was a self-effectuating amendment, but the legislature said no. They hate citizens petitions. They hate the amendments that come about of citizens petitions, and they'll do anything they can to make it more harder. So there was a whole discussion of what completion of sentence means. Does it mean you have to finish your probation, your parole? Do you have to pay all your fines? And of course, they made it as hard as they could. And so a lot of the people are not going to be able to vote. Desmond Meade, who was the lead behind Amendment 4, said so I think there were about 1.2 million people who qualified, and he said about 2/3 will be okay, but about 1/3 won't be okay under this new law. They're going to challenge it, and I think they should. I hope they challenge it in court. So that was another really disturbing piece of legislation we passed. Education. So, they just love charter schools. They love vouchers. They really are out to destroy our public schools. I mean, that's the bottom line, is they do not like our public school system. And I am a graduate of Florida Public Schools, K through 12, and I'm a real strong supporter, and it's always so disheartening. So, as you probably know, we have a voucher system in place right now in Florida, under which a corporation, rather than paying their corporate income taxes to the state, they can elect to give the money to this organization, or I think there's two of them, two different ones. And the money then can go for a student to go to private school. So it's the corporation, and that's how they get around the separation of church and state, because the money is going from the corporation directly to the private schools through this entity. Well, this year, they got emboldened because the new governor got to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. And actually, when they did something this year that had actually been challenged 10 years ago and found unconstitutional, but now they have these new justices, so they decided they're going to do it. This year, they said, instead of paying that, some of the money that we as taxpayers are paying, it goes into this fund called the FEFP, which is where the education money comes, is going to go straight to vouchers for private schools. So it is our taxpayer money going to a private school. Now, I would imagine it will be a challenge, but I don't know what's going to happen with the new justices.
4 on the Supreme Court.
Right, exactly, right. Same issue. I mean, we've got the same issue with our Florida Supreme Court now, and then you've got the U.S. Supreme Court. So I'm really disheartened to hear that that our taxpayer money, I never liked the corporate scholarships, never made me happy, but to hear that our actual taxpayer money is going to be going for students to go to attend private schools. And, it's all part of the plan. Jeb Bush came up and was so happy because he tried it in 2007, and it didn't go through. And that was the court case. And so when they passed the bill, Jeb was there. He came to Tallahassee. So that was another disturbing thing. Sanctuary cities. Okay, next bad bill. So, sanctuary cities are cities that don't comply with the federal immigration and customs enforcement law, with what they call detainers. There are no cities in the states, no cities, no counties in the entire state of Florida. We asked them repeatedly, where is there a sanctuary city in Florida? They said there are none. They know that. They know that. And despite that, they passed this bill saying you can't have a sanctuary city in the state of Florida, and that so it requires the law enforcement to work with immigration and naturalization. So if, for instance, if somebody gets pulled over for driving with a taillight out, they can now ask them to see their immigration papers, and arrest them for being in the country undocumented. So this was really so unnecessary, so vindictive, and the bad thing is these immigrant communities are no longer going to trust the police ever, and we're going to have more crime in some of these communities because people aren't going to call the police. They're not going to, so it's really a counterproductive bill, but they loved it for their red meat base. I'm trying to think, oh, yes, and then the last one, that's just, there were yes, exactly. There were so many, but those are what I would call the really ugly. And we can talk a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about healthcare after this, because those are like just the bad. These are the really ugly. The last one has to do with, I told you they don't like our citizens' petitions. So on the the night before the end of session, they put an amendment on a bill, which the bill had been floating around, but we thought it was dead and they weren't going to talk about it. They added it as an amendment. It wasn't even germane, but they get to rule on germanity, so they put it on. They said it's germane. And it says that it affects our ability to gather petitions. And the governor already signed it. So what it says is, if you are paying someone to gather petitions, you can't pay them per petition. You have to pay them an hourly rate. And most of them now are being paid per petition, so that changes the whole dynamics of that. The person has to be registered, including any volunteers. So all of you who are collecting petitions will have to register, and all petitions have to be turned in within 30 days from the time that you receive them. So it's just an effort to make it harder to gather petitions, to put amendments on the ballot, because the best things that we've had in the state of Florida have been done by citizens' petitions. I mean, we had fair districts, we've had medical marijuana, we've had some solar amendments on the ballot. We've had some really good things that have happened because of it, and we have some great petitions that are pending for 2020. We have Medicaid expansion, hopefully it'll be on the ballot in 2020. We have a $15 minimum wage on the ballot in 2020. So they just want to make it harder and harder for us to be able to do it. But you know what? We're not going to let them. We're going to still do it. We're still going to get our petitions. We're still going to get those things on the ballot. So we're not going to give up on those issues. Healthcare. So my greatest disappointment in the Florida legislature now I just finished my 9th session, is that we did not expand Medicaid in the state of Florida. Yeah. And because of that, we have about 840,000 people who don't have health insurance, who don't get any preventative treatment for the most part, who use hospitals only when they're in an acute grave situation, which costs so much more money than if we were able to do some preventative care, and then those hospitals have to treat them. So because of that, our healthcare budget is always in dire straits, because we have all these people and we have to help the hospitals out because they're treating people. And because of the ideology of refusing to accept Medicaid expansion, they keep looking at healthcare and they keep coming up with these, twisting themselves into a pretzel, trying to figure out how they can cut healthcare costs. And they do these crazy things, and this year was no exception. This year was a priority of the Speaker of the House. So one thing we did is we eliminated what's known as a certificate of need which is when a hospital wants to open up, they have to show that there is a need in the community for the hospital. That is gone. So now, we tried to make that bill a little better in the Senate, because the Senate normally is the more deliberative body, and we had our version of it, which said you have to have a minimum number of beds, you have to treat charity cases, you have to accept Medicaid. They didn't even agree to any of those. So now, a hospital can open up next door to Delray with 20 beds, doesn't have to take Medicaid, doesn't have to treat any charity patients, can turn them away, can say, here, go to Delray. So that was one thing they did. 2, they passed a telehealth bill, which, definitely, I'm not against the internet and against doing things on the internet, but as part of the telehealth bill, they did allow out-of-state doctors to come to be able to do it without a lot of regulation. And so I'm a little concerned about that. I voted no on the bill for that reason, because I don't think we're going to be monitoring the safety enough of the telehealth when we're allowing all these out-of-state doctors. They also passed what Donna Shalala, I was with her on Saturday, calls junk insurance plans. So there are these insurance plans, so now a doctor, we passed it a couple of years ago, but this year we expanded it to some other, a couple of years ago I think we just allowed internists, now we're allowing more, so we're like expanding this whole product. And what it basically says is you can go to a doctor and contract for a certain amount per month, and you will get treated by that doctor. But the problem is, if it's not major medical, so if you have to go to a hospital, you're not going to get any coverage for hospital coverage. You're paying this doctor to see you, and you have no hospital coverage. And they don't require that you cover pre-existing conditions. Secretary Shalala was explaining that they can raise the rates for people who have pre-existing conditions. So it's really, they're not good policies at all, and that was another thing that they did. And then you probably heard about this prescription drug issue, because I think the governor just signed the bill. And it said that we're gonna look into importing prescription drugs from Canada to lower our costs. Now, it sounds great, I want lower prescription drug costs. But I was with Donna Shalala, and I voted no on the bill because, even before that, because I had people come talk to me from the pharmaceuticals in different places, and they said to me, you're not going to be able to know really where those drugs came from. They can come into Canada from a third country, they're going to send them here, there's not enough safety regulations, and the New York Times actually did an article after session even, where somebody went to China and they checked the drugs, and most of the drugs there were not even what they said, and they also went to India, and the drugs also weren't verified. So I had real concerns about that, and the other concern I had to do with Canada. I mean, we haven't heard from Canada. They haven't said like, yeah, this is a great idea. And they negotiate for their drugs with their people based on their number of people. Now they're going to be, exponentially greater because of the state of Florida. Also, the federal government has to approve it, and Secretary Shalala said no secretary has ever approved that, and she doesn't think it'll ever be approved. So it's kind of like political theater. Oh, we did a great job, we're going to lower prescription drug prices, but in reality, it'll probably never happen. But, that's the kind of things that they do to make it look like they're affecting change in the healthcare arena. So I'm going to end with a little more upbeat note, and then I'm happy to take questions and hear some of the issues that you guys want to talk about. So we always pass. Oh, and actually, first I'll talk about this. I'll give you my one upbeat, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of my bills, and then we can finish up. So we always pass what I consider is a bill that's always trivial or frivolous in the legislature, and it amazes me that we only passed something like 190 bills total, and I think 3,500 were filed. And only 190 passed. And so why we waste our time on trivial and frivolous bills always amazes me. But my nominee for this year's bill is on your lottery tickets. the governor is not sure if he's gonna sign it, but if he signs it, on your lottery tickets now, it will have to say, warning, gambling is addictive. This is what we need to spend our time doing. I do want to just talk to you about a couple of my bills. So like I said, most of my bills did not get through. I got one bill about trademark through, but the bills that I was the most happy that we actually had discussions, which were amazing because I had filed similar bills in the House and never got any discussions. One was for long-acting reversible contraceptives. We were going to do a pilot program in Palm Beach County because they did it in Colorado, and when they gave them out, the teen birth rate dropped by like 50%, the abortion rate dropped by like 50%. So it's a proven program, and especially now that we see what's going on nationwide with the abortion issue, if you don't want people to have abortions, then let them have access to contraceptives. And we actually had 2 hearings on it, which was shocking. In the Florida legislature, we were discussing contraceptives, and it passed 2 committees. And then I was hoping to get it in the budget, which it didn't matter if it wouldn't have passed. I could have just had it in the budget, but we didn't succeed. But I will continue to advocate for that. And the other bill that I was really excited that we actually had any hearings on, as many of you may know, I usually bring a gun control bill every year. I've done everything. I've done magazines. I've said you shouldn't have guns in daycare centers. I've done a domestic violence gun bill. So last year, during the Parkland, before Parkland, my bill that I filed was what they call the red flag law, which says that if you're a police officer, you can go to court and request to take a gun away from someone who's a danger to themselves or others. And when Parkland happened, and they realized, wow, we better do something, they took my bill and they made it part of the Parkland bill, and it became the law in the state of Florida. Yeah. And since that time, my statistics are a couple months old now already, and the law's only been in place for like a year, and our statistics showed that 1,400 times the police had used that law in taking guns away. So a lot of the police departments love that. They like that they have access to it. My bill, the way I had drafted it, and I work with a lot of gun control groups, and that's how I had gotten the idea, included family members also, that a family member could go to court if they were worried that somebody was a risk to themselves or to others and ask for the gun to be removed. They were absolutely adamant last year, no, we're not going to include family members. So I brought the bill this year back, and I said, let's add in family members, let's make this better. And there were some suicides, some Parkland students, and so I said, look, if you had my bill, it would help with the suicides, because the family members know, who better than a family member to know, I don't like this person having access to the gun. So one of the Republicans took it on with me, and he worked with me, and we had a very narrow definition of who was family. He only allowed parents, siblings, and grandparents. Yeah, it was a start. That's what I felt like. And we had a hearing, and it passed the first committee. And then the second committee, he said to me, oh, it's not going to pass. And the other problem was we had no traction in the House. And the House is going to be the worst. I mean, I know this. The Speaker of the House came to me, and one of the next speakers, and he said he hates that bill. So that's going to be a problem. But to have that discussion in the Florida legislature, to really have a discussion about gun control, I was really happy that at least we got to talk about it a little bit. I mean, I would have liked to see it done more. And then the other bill that I didn't get over the finish line that I'm going to really push for next year, and it was a real bipartisan bill, and it was its first year. Sometimes the Florida legislature's slow. You have to do things in baby steps. It was a new program, just like we had the Silver Alert, it was going to be called the Orange Alert, and it was for adults with developmental disabilities. And it was in response to someone we had heard in Port St. Lucie who went missing, there was like no way to alert people that he was missing. Some people saw him at a gas station, and then later on he was found in a retention pond dead. So my bill would have a mechanism for as soon as somebody like that went missing, there would be an alert issued to the sheriff's department, in the lotteries, in the gas station. They could put on a description of the person, and maybe it would save some lives. That's what we're trying to do and help. And that bill got I got it heard in all the Senate committees, and the House got a little bit slowed, but so I think next year we should be able to get that bill through. So I'd be really happy to see us do something for that to help people with developmental disabilities. We have the Amber Alert for children, we have the Silver for older, but this would kind of cover the in-between area. So that's kind of a synopsis of the session, but I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. Wow, lots of questions. Okay.
What is your and your Democratic colleagues in Tallahassee feel about the governor's holding a cabinet meeting in Israel?
I mean, I haven't heard, I can only speak personally, and I think it was ridiculous. There's no reason. I mean, it's fine. If he wants to do a trade mission in Israel, I don't have any problem with him doing a trade mission. But why he called a cabinet meeting over there in Israel was absurd, and it would I think it violates the Sunshine State laws, and, because how are people going to get there? And they said that they had problems with the streaming. So I think it was really unnecessary and just grandstanding to try and get the Jewish vote, unfortunately.
When does the restrictions on the petitions?
So 30 days,
Now?
Yes.
From July 1 it goes in?
I think so.
And
But they will be giving, I'm sure we're going to get some guidelines about how you register and where you have to register. I think it's going to be with the SOE, but immediately the restriction on paying people per petition is already in effect.
And I hear you have to get your petition from the SOE.
Oh, really? I don't know. That I haven't heard. Yes.
Have you heard any news about the Equal Rights Amendment?
Yeah, so did anybody see John Oliver? Did anybody watch John Oliver? Right, so it's funny, yeah, so I've usually brought the Equal Rights Amendment. I used to bring it every year, yeah. I brought it every year, and then when I knew I was leaving the House, I got a new House person to bring it, and then so there was always a senator. So I'm still promoting it. I'm not one of the actual sponsors.
He said in 27 states that
Well,
don't have an Equal Rights Amendment.
That's probably true, because Florida actually has one. We do have one, but we still want it in the Constitution. Those are state, we want it in the Constitution, and they only need one more state
Right.
to go back to Congress and say. So I would say that Slimton, in all the years I brought it in Florida, 1 year I got what they called a workshop. Were any of you there? Were you there, Arlene? Yeah. We actually got a workshop, which was amazing. We bugged the chair so much, he finally just said, okay, we'll hear it. We won't vote on it, but we'll hear it. And it was fabulous. It was really great. But even with that, we couldn't get it the next year. Virginia is one of the states, and I have a feeling Virginia will do it before Florida. Yeah, it would be great. But John Oliver challenged Florida. He challenged Florida, so maybe it'll happen.
You mentioned the minimum wage, $15. I saw someone with petitions for that. Is there more than one? Because that one did it over like 7 or 8 years.
It's probably a phase-in. It's probably the same one. Most of them are phase-in. That's how most of them have been done nationwide. I haven't seen the actual one. And John Morgan is sponsoring that from Morgan & Morgan. And he's the one who sponsored the medical marijuana amendment, and he's been putting a lot of money, which is great. So I think it has a good chance of being on the ballot.
The same people who were carrying that one had one on voting, which seemed to be...
They shouldn't have that, because that's a bad petition.
Yeah.
That's a really bad petition. So I don't understand how, because I went to the driver's license place out here on Atlantic, and there was a table, and they had like all different petitions. And I don't understand, because that's a bad petition. So what it is they call it jungle primaries. They do it in California, and it's just like the top 2 winners get to go, and that could be 2 Republicans. We could get hurt in a jungle primary, so I'm not supporting the jungle primary petition. But I think the Republicans are, I think it'll be on the ballot, I think we're gonna have to fight against it if it makes it on the ballot.
In rural Florida, people are working in agriculture for less than the minimum wage, and their communities will go under if they had to work for minimum wage.
You know, that's the argument that businesses make, but I don't believe it. They can
Well,
charge more
I've
money.
seen it in the orange groves. People are sitting there selling oranges off their personal farms on the roadside, and I know they're not getting minimum wage, so what about the people who are
But
not
if
in the
that's-
system?
If they're you know, nobody's paying them, those people are their own bosses, so no, you don't have to say them
It's possible,
minimum
but
wage.
they pick, like little acorn things and stuff, and a lot of people in the community go and pick these things, and they take whatever they get. My point is there seems to be like a three-tiered structure of America where people are just not in the system at all, and you can't expect them to work for minimum wage, you can't expect anything. What happens to all these people are sort of falling out? You know what I'm saying?
It's a problem, I mean, there's a real problem, but I don't think it's gonna hurt. I mean, in Seattle, they raised the minimum wage to $15, and the economy's still doing fine. Everybody says the sky's gonna fall if you raise.
Seattle is an amazing place. I'm
Yeah.
from Seattle, and they have Amazon, Boeing, Microsoft, the highest education per capita, and you cannot compare Florida to Seattle.
You know, but I don't think the sky's gonna fall if we raise the minimum wage.
No, I'm not arguing
Yeah.
against the
Yeah.
minimum wage.
okay.
I'm saying that there's a whole bunch of society that's working under the minimum wage, and it's like under the counter. But you have the cities with all the money, and then you have the rural areas where people are like at each other's throats, which are good Republican areas, a lot of them. And they're also doing predatory policing, where their revenues are just off of the people, you know, so you have, it's like a serfdom, or,
Yeah,
Where-
no, it's bad. I mean, we've got some real problems, and that's societal, you know. I don't know how to address some of those.
I guess it's
yeah.
not your area, so it's not your.
No, I mean, it is. I mean, it is my problem, but I mean, I don't know what to do with people who aren't in the system. I mean, we're trying to help people who are in the system get more money. But if you're out of the system, I don't know how you bring somebody back in. Yeah.
Yes.
I attended the state convention last weekend, and they brought up a very, very alarming possibility of the state deregulating electric power.
Yeah, that's a
And,
petition also.
That is horrendous.
I am not supporting that petition. I agree with you. I know some other, you know, I mean, we have monopolies on utilities in the state, and they are the elephant in the room. So it's a really hard situation, and so this is kind of to address this is to address the FPLs and the Duke and everything, but I don't think it's the right way to address it, so I'm not supporting that amendment also. I know some states have done it, and it's been,
Horrible.
and we have really good utility rates. We do. Yeah.
I heard there's tremendous problems with insurance with guns in schools.
That is a big issue. It is, so what he's referring to is, some of the insurers have said, if you're gonna arm your teachers, we're not gonna insure you, because it's too high risk. Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know what those school districts are gonna do. That's a voluntary decision of the school districts, and I think it will be very foolish of them to lose their insurance. Let me go back here, so.
Hey, Lori. Yeah, I was gonna with the 6-seat disadvantage in the Senate, and I think 26-seat disadvantage in the House, and knowing we're gonna be facing the same disadvantage in the, January session upcoming, we know about how the numbers work against us, but I think people in the room probably may not understand the finer points of the rules of the House and the rules of the Senate, and how they are both used by the majority to push their agenda, and also how we have an opportunity as the minority to use rules to a certain extent. Could you perhaps go over, some of the multitude of rules of the House?
So one of the biggest things that we have is when we get above 1/3, which we are right now in both chambers. In the Senate, we're 23 to 17, which is much better. When I started 10 years ago, we were 2812. So we're making progress. We're moving the number forward. And in the House now, we're over 1/3, but just barely. One of the things we can do to slow down the process is we can ask them to have to read all the bills. And they don't like that. We use it sparingly. We really only use it when something is really going bad. I think I've only been there a couple times when it's actually been used. So that's like our nuclear option when we really get in trouble. Sometimes they need 2/3 on certain votes. For instance, on public records, all public records exemptions need 2/3. And if we can stick together as a caucus, we can stop it, because now we have more than 1/3. Sometimes our caucus doesn't stick together. We are the big tent, we're the big tent, so not everybody does, but, when we know that, and so they don't bring a lot of bills that need 2/3 unless it's something that's a priority. My personal viewpoint is that the reason this session was so bad, and it was bad, I will tell you, having been there 9 sessions, all those things I told you about at the beginning, they were really discouraging. I think it was so bad for 2 reasons. One, they see the writing on the wall, and they see that the numbers are getting closer and closer. And so they're gonna do everything they can right now when they have the numbers. And number 2, it wasn't an election year. And in a non-election year, people are not paying attention. Nobody's watching, so they're like, we're just gonna push all this stuff through. Nobody's paying attention, and we'll get away with it. Now, next year's an election year, which means they're gonna try and gin up their base again, which they certainly did with all these red meat bills for their base, but they're also gonna try and make everybody else happier too. We didn't talk about the environment, which I should talk a little bit about the environment. So this governor is significantly better than Rick Scott on the environment. Didn't take a lot. Remember how low the bar was, but he is significantly better. And we did put a lot of money into Everglades restoration, and I think we put $680 million into all the good land restoration and things. Some of it Everglades restoration, some of it springs, some of it septic to sewer. We didn't actually pass any real legislation though, and we heard a lot. I was on the committee, Environmental and Natural Resources, and we heard a lot of legislation about what are we gonna do about the fertilizers and what are we gonna do about the septic tanks. And then they didn't even pass one piece. They couldn't even get one piece of legislation through. But we did put money, and we did form a blue-green algae task force, which met yesterday for the first time. The governor does have somebody who's like a scientist, somebody in charge of, which the other governor, science was like anathema to him. So this is, we're making some progress in this area, but expect next year, I think you're gonna see more on the environment. They're gonna pretend like they're moderate. In an election year, you're gonna see more moderation, unfortunately, and, don't fall for it. Well, I got somebody, who haven't I heard from? Pat, I don't think, yeah.
This just gets back to the teachers. What's the reaction from teachers in the public school system, where they're going to be able to have a gun in the classroom? I was a teacher, there's no way, I would go to class with a gun anyway, in my pocketbook or whatever, okay? So are they losing teachers?
So it's interesting. We might as well be 2 states, North Florida and South Florida. In North Florida, a lot of the teachers are like, hell yes, I want a gun. Give me a gun. They're like, they have some people who are in the military. They say, I was in the military, I know what I'm doing, and I want a gun. And then you have many other teachers like yourself who are like, I don't want this, and I don't want any part of it. I think it's a big mistake. So I've got, I put something, I think we got like tons of letters from teachers, and I only got like a few saying like, yes. And we did like a little Facebook thing right before the vote. We took the stack of letters, we printed all the emails out, and we said, this is all we got saying, do not arm teachers. And I got a lot of pushback after I put that up from people who were like, I think you should arm teachers, so there's people on both sides of the issue.
Isn't it by county though?
It is, so now
And
it's
we're
only,
exempt here.
yeah, we're not doing it in Palm Beach County, they're not doing it in Dade, Broward, Hillsborough, any of the big counties are not doing it, so, yeah.
Can you inform me what Senate committee that you're on?
Sure, yeah, so I am on the Healthcare Committee, I'm on Education, I'm on Environment and Natural Resources, and my Money Committee is the Ag and Environmental and Natural Resources also. So, yeah, so the committees I got were pretty good, I really liked, and I had never, in my 9 years, I had never been on an Education Committee, and I'm really glad I was.
One of the things that we're gonna do at our next meeting is have a working meeting where people can, write. And one of the things that I wanna do is send postcards to DeSantis and ask him why he doesn't wanna take the free federal money to have a Medicaid rollout. I mean, it's absolutely indefensible. I mean, the only defense is we don't want the government to look like it's doing anything good.
Right, I mean, there's still 17 states like Florida.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
33 states
Republicans-
that have taken it, right, but plenty of Republican states have taken it too, and they're happy.
Yeah.
They're happy they do it, but.
What's the rationale that they don't?
The original rationale, it keeps changing, but the original rationale I heard, so originally the federal government was gonna pay 100%, and then after 5 years, I think it was 90%. And they were worried about how that 90, when we had to pay the 10%, that it would cost us too much money. Yeah, and they also said, what if the federal government doesn't pay? Which is such an absurd argument, because the federal government gives us money for everything, roads and healthcare, and have they ever not paid us, so that's crazy.
I read a few letters in the Palm Beach Post, like for and against developing roads going through the
Oh,
middle
yeah, we
of,
didn't talk about that, yeah.
can you give me, I mean.
Sure, so that was the Senate president's priority, which is very unfortunate. He wants to build 3 super highways, none of them anywhere near population areas.
Right.
All in basically in rural areas, and all sort of near where he lives. Yeah. And so we put money for some studies, and I really think it's just, I think it'll never happen. That's my opinion. I think it's just his priority. Once he's gone, no one else cares about it. The Department of Transportation doesn't want the roads. They didn't ask for them. The environmentalists are very worried about the impact. So I think it was just his pipe dream. And I don't think it's really ever going to happen, but it's still there. It did pass.
I have a suggestion from State Washington. Governor Inslee has health care for everybody in State Washington. Maybe some committee could contact him and find out how they got health care for every citizen.
They're Democrats.
But they must have had a plan,
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. I think it's great.
Maybe
Yeah.
to find out how they did it.
Yeah, no, I mean, this state, they don't want that, but I agree. I would love it if we did that the way we did it.
What about the voting? They took away Susan Booker in Palm Beach County, and she was given these old machines, and Rick Scott never funded that stuff. Do you guys ever talk about how we can change that down here?
We did, actually.
They admitted that there was some kind of false crap going on with the voting
Yeah,
in
no, I
some
mean,
2 counties down here.
yeah, I mean, I was not happy that Susan Booker was removed from her office. I think that was
What about the
Yeah.
lady in Broward? She did a worse job than Susan.
she had her, I don't know, I can't speak to the Broward issues as much as I know what's happened in Palm Beach. But, Susan was following the law and using the machines that were certified by the state.
But Rick wouldn't fund any.
Well, it's,
better machines.
and then they have the counties, they make the counties actually fund. So our county now has put in place the money, and we do have new machines coming in. And we did pass some law changes to the voter laws. They're nothing spectacular, but we did.
But will it be a paper ballot still?
Oh, yeah, it is. We actually looked into it. Some constituent just asked us the other day. It's this, and actually no more of that little stupid line. That's done. Yeah, no more. We were one of the few places in the state that has that line. Now it will be a bubble, and you will
Right.
bubble it in, which I think is gonna be a lot better for
And-
people.
And also the
Yeah.
BBM are gonna be no postage. and they're
They're
on it.
working
Yeah.
on that, it hasn't happened yet, it hasn't happened, wait, let me ask.
Is there,
this one.
has there been any progress in getting, the, signatures identified?
I mean, we're doing it in the Democratic Party, so one of the things I was told is that we're gonna be re-registering people who are older and having them re-sign, and so that the signatures will match. So we're gonna be doing things to make sure people's signatures are
My
okay.
question is on voting as well. I'm looking at this old copy where Gillum should have been governor.
Yeah.
There was so much crap going on. What control do we have over gerrymandering and risky tricks? I
Well,
mean,
gerrymandering, we have fair districts now, so when we get the census in 2020 and then we have to redo the maps in 2022, we have fair districts, which I think will make a difference in the House. If you remember, the League of Women Voters challenged the Senate maps and the congressional maps, and that's why our numbers are much better in the Senate and in Congress too, we're doing better. So but we never challenged the House, so the House is gonna change because of the anti-gerrymandering. And then what was your other part?
the
Oh,
other question was
risk.
election rigging.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, I
that's a
have so
problem.
many stories about what the Republicans did, it just pisses me off.
It is a problem,
And
and we're
we
trying.
know about it and nothing's done about it, that's what kills me.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, in that new voting bill, for instance, is that, all ballots in the state now have to be uniform, which is good. Because if you remember, Bill Nelson's name was on the bottom of the Broward ballot, and that's partly why he lost, because people didn't vote. So now every ballot will be uniform. I mean, we are doing things, but not
I
enough.
was wondering how much control we have.
Yeah, we're doing things.
Speaking about, I'm a poll worker, so I've seen a lot of problems with ballot. One of the problems that was with the governor's race was that it said governor and lieutenant governor. And people, voters would vote for two things, so it should take out the and, put a slash or something, so that was one comment
That
about
is-
the ballot.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because that, and also, I remember in the presidential race, people would vote for more than one.
But when they put the ballot in, they see immediately, when they put it in the machine, they know it's an
Right,
overvote.
And then they get.
And then you tell them what they have to do to fix it, and they can fix it.
Right, and then they fix it, and then and then they come back, and then they do it again,
I mean, you can only do what you can do. People are, make mistakes, but at least we have a mechanism with the overvoting to tell them that they made the mistake.
I mean, another thing about the voting is like the voter ID thing is like that it has to be a valid, current thing. It makes no, I mean, so you know that this is a real person, and then, so their license expired because for whatever reason, and,
It's a problem. I mean, they allow NRA cards, and yet,
and then.
and that we have people who,
Yeah, and then people that would bring, they'd say, okay, I got my concealed permit thing, so they bring it out, but it doesn't have a signature in it, and then they say, okay, well, here's my driver's license, so they just, and just one other question about the environment, what is the status on oil drilling?
Oh, great question. So we had a couple bills, because all the Republicans now say they don't want fracking, which is kind of funny because in the whole time I've been in the legislature, they really want fracking. So there were two competing bills, and one was brought by a Democrat and one was brought by a Republican. And the Republican bill was very sneaky, and they said that you couldn't have fracking, but you could have this process called gas acidization, I think it was, something like that, which is fracking.
Right.
So they were trying to get it through, even though it was like pull the wool over people's eyes, and neither bill passed, which is so interesting. So right now, you can probably still frack in the state of Florida because those bills didn't pass, but there's a lot of sentiment against fracking. And I think eventually we'll do something about it, because this public is really strongly against it.
Well, wasn't there an oil company that wanted to?
There's somebody who's doing something in the Everglades, and I'm not sure what the status of that is right now. Sure.
But wasn't a amendment passed to prohibit
Yes.
fracking?
Right, there is a constitutional amendment, you're right, there was, yes.
But I have another
Yeah.
question. Sure. Okay, sanctuary is not a technical term, but what about welcoming cities? Delray Beach, the Palm Beach School, and
Yeah.
West Palm Beach
I think it's
are
great.
welcoming cities.
Yeah, and that's okay.
I worked really hard to
Yeah.
get here.
I like those, I think it's great.
About these voting machines that are coming in, do you know when they're coming in?
Um,
I mean, the vote is
Yeah,
2020, so.
oh, it'll be before that. I saw Wendy Link, she did a presentation, and, because there are some city elections in March, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So I think she's planning on having them by March.
Well, the one thing you should keep in mind, because I've had to deal with receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment and having to test it out before it works.
Yeah.
And I don't mean
Yeah.
turn it on and see if
No,
the
I
lights come
know,
on.
I know, we
They
know,
should run these machines for at least a month
they know.
before.
Well,
And
we'll see, you know, they
See.
removed Susan Booker because they said she was incompetent, so we'll see what this new supervisor does.
Yeah.
It's not, that's not an easy job
The
at all.
problem is that you can't trust Republicans to do the right job, even if they get the right job to do. So screw it up somehow.
Well, Wendy Link is changing her registration, she's joining us, so which is kind of funny.
She's an NPA.
She is an NPA, and we heard she might be changing to a Democrat too. Because she wants to run for she's thinking of running for the position, so.
She's only got a couple more days left to run.
Right, that's right, June 16th or something like that, she has to do it by June 16th if she's gonna do it, so we'll see what happens.
Hey, Lord, if I could steal like 2 minutes. You know, while we're on the topic of voting here in Palm Beach County, one of the things I wanted to let you guys know is at the most recent meeting of the DEC, Democratic Executive Committee, also known as the Palm Beach County Democratic Party, Commissioner McKinley let us know that at an upcoming meeting of the Palm Beach County Commission, I believe on the 25th, but I will verify that date, they will be taking up the question of funding postage for the vote by mail ballots. Now, Supervisor Link has put forth supposedly a study indicating that there's no inducement for people to use VBM if their postage is paid. We know that's hogwash. And so I would call on all of you to get to West Palm Beach on that day to let our commissioners know that we want the postage paid. There is no greater tool that Democrats have, especially in this upcoming presidential election year, and of course turnover of half the Senate, as well as, you know, the entire House. A vote by mail ballot received by someone holds with it at least a minimum 85% assurance that they are going to vote. They will have even greater assurance if they know that their postage is paid and they don't have to resort to third-party people like myself going to their house to pick up their ballot who they may not trust is actually going to deliver to us. So I urge you to get to West Palm Beach for that upcoming meeting and let the commissioners know we want our postage paid.
Get me the date, and I'll send it to.
Yes, yeah, Mike will.
Yeah,
Mike will send it out, we'll
I'll
verify the
send
date
you
and send it
the
out.
email.
Okay, that's critical.
If you're on the mailing list, and you signed in tonight, you are. Lori, can I do two quick questions? One, I had heard something about them trying to raise the percentage from 60% to a supermajority of 2/3. And then the other one, quickly, the NRA, do you sense any difference? I would like to get a T-shirt that says, "I'm not the NRA and I vote." You know, I mean, because, and it seems to me that there ought to be, you know, some.
Right, okay. That bill about the supermajority did not pass for the petitions, which is great, that you need 2/3. The NRA voters are single-issue voters, and we are not, because we're looking at the environment, we're looking at guns, we're looking at education, and the more of us who you know, look at that issue, the better it is, obviously. You know, we need more people who are like that. interestingly, there has been, so the woman who runs the NRA in the state of Florida, yeah, you may have seen her, she's an Uber lobbyist, basically. I kind of think she's evil incarnate, but she just, two Democrats, a Republican and a House member, filed an ethics complaint against her because she has not been reporting her lobbyist income. So, yeah, so that's gonna be really fascinating to see how that complaint plays out. I think the Senate Rules Chair said she has like 30 days to respond to the complaint. So I'll be really curious to see what they do about that issue. So that could hurt the NRA in the state if this woman ends up having to resign because she's been there forever and she's got everybody under her thumb.
Meanwhile, Pierre's done a good job hurting the rest of the country with what he's done.
But
with
John
the funds.
Oliver North had to leave, so,
Yeah.
yeah, they've had their share of problems.
What you say about the single issue, so the legislators don't face the same kind, on the NRA and I vote.
Right,
It
right.
scares them more
Right,
than
it does.
I'm
It
not
does.
the NRA.
I mean, certainly not the Democrats, but yes, the Republicans are very worried about the NRA, because they primary them, and they spend a lot of money on primaries against them.
How much has the right-wing model legislation machine been impacting the Senate and the House?
Pretty, Alec is very
We don't have
impactful.
one on our side, as far as I know.
Well, we don't, but we actually have a group that I met with that's been pretty active. I went to their meeting in December. It's called SIX, S-I-X, and it's a progressive group, and they bring progressive legislators all over the country together, and we talk about issues. So I don't know if we had model legislation like Alex does, but we did talk about a lot of issues. So we have something sort of similar, but the Alec thing is just so funny because they basically just hand them bills. And we had a woman in my time in the legislature who just filed the bill with bill drafting, and then bill drafting kept the language in, so it even said Alec in the bill, which was so embarrassing to this woman who like didn't even look at the piece of legislation to make sure it said Florida as opposed to Alec. You know, so we don't have anybody handing us legislation like that, so.
I've got a nice story, at the, gala this weekend, Andrew Warren, who is the, state attorney for Hillsborough, what he did for Amendment 4, because in all the stipulations, they didn't put limits. So what he did is get the tens of thousands of, returning citizens, former, offenders, to line up and walk towards the supervisor of elections office picking up garbage, and that would be their community service version. And they go right on in and register, and Dave Arenberg was sitting next to him and said, wow, that's a good idea.
That's good. I mean, I think we're gonna work around what they did, but it's unfortunate they did it. Yes, I like that. No?
I was wondering if there's any concern or discussion over having the semi-open primaries.
So that was discussed this week a little bit. I was at the convention also, and right now they tabled. The Democratic Party tabled it. Now, I will tell you my concern about having the semi-open primaries. I think I'm against it, even though I understand there's more and more people becoming NPAs, and yes, maybe we do want to reach out to them. But I will tell you, the Republicans are so devious, and I can only imagine that all these Republicans are going to go register as Democrats, and then go vote for a candidate they know that is the weaker candidate that they can beat. And I don't want to.
Right now.
No, but they would have to. They actually have to change their registration. It's a little more onerous. Right now, of course, they can change your registration and everything and vote. But if you have an open primary, it makes it a lot easier for people to be able to do that. So I'm a little worried about it. I mean, I do feel bad, but I also feel like if you want to vote in the Democratic primary, then register as a Democrat. Right, register as a Democrat. Okay, final question.
So, something to in the back of your mind for January is, you know, you support a lot of gun safety legislation. Here's one to consider. We've talked about this before. The law that's currently on the books that allows the state to sanction counties and municipalities for creating and enforcing gun safety ordinances, that has got to go.
I agree.
The Republican.
Well, I think it's being challenged right now in court. I think there's a court challenge on that law. I think there is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which would be good if it succeeds.
Well, and it's, you know, it's the perfect example of utter hypocrisy on the part of the Republicans.
No question.
You know,
No question.
they fight against abortion on the grounds that it's the federal government trying to tell states what to do. They want states' rights, and yet they don't want to push that down further to counties and municipalities. So let's call it on their
Yeah,
nonsense.
I mean, we didn't talk about home rule. I do that speech when I go talk to my cities. I have 13 cities. You cannot believe the things we did this year to hurt home rule. We said, because they say, you know, as opposed to government closest to the people being the best, which I agree with, they say we in Tallahassee know what's best for everyone. So we now passed a bill this year, probably goes in that frivolous category also, saying that a city cannot prevent you from growing a vegetable garden in your front yard. So if you wanted to plant corn in your front yard, the city cannot. Your HOA can, but your city cannot. Your HOA can tell you. Yeah, but we passed a bill about tree trimming.
Where they can't see
Yeah,
it.
we passed a bill about tree trimming also, so the city can't regulate some tree trimming, and tree removal and tree replacement, if you get an arborist certificate. We did pass the bill saying that no cities could ban plastic straws, but believe it or not, the governor vetoed that. So, that's his environmental, he's trying to be a little environmentally, right, a little.
But he's looking ahead.
Yeah, he is, that's what I'm saying, you're gonna see some environmental stuff next year, more environmental, that's where he's playing in that field, definitely. We passed bills about impact fees and, a lot of really bad things for cities this year, and you know what, and a lot of these people, a lot of the Republican legislators have been in local government, and they get up there to Tallahassee and they just march in lockstep with leadership and hurt their cities that they represented and their counties. So it is always amazing to me. And you know, the cities and counties don't have any money. They do have lobbyists that come up there, but they don't have money, so there's nobody who, you know, so that they don't feel any beholden at all. They're very beholden to a lot of the larger lobbyists, but there's no cities and counties giving them any money, so they just hurt the cities and counties all the way through, which is disturbing. All right, wait, one final, literally final.
And this is actually just an aside. I was just in Italy, and what they've done to replace paper straws is they're using pasta.
Well, that's fine.
All right, I'm gonna end up for the night.
This is for Michael. This is for Michael.
Over my offices at 95 and Gateway, and the address is on the Berman bulletin that I passed out. If you have any constituent issues, we're always happy to help you.
Cookies.
Do you have more on the agenda? Or can I ask you if I can sing the songs?
Oh, yes, go right ahead, that's right. You said,
What are we gonna sing? Hold on.
you're gonna sing.
I wrote two parodies. Whoop. Is this working?
Yeah, it is.
I wrote two parodies, and one of them is a sing-along, so I'm gonna go over here.
Okay. You didn't know we get entertainment, too.
Oh, Lori, you gotta hear the one on gun control. Okay. This one is audience participation at the end of each paragraph, and it's called Blame It on Congress. And when I sing Blame It on Congress, you'll see how it ends with the next few paragraphs. You have to sing with me. Anyone can buy a gun, they're easy to obtain. Some children get their hands on them, they think it's just a game. We've got to fight the NRA. They really are insane. Our Congress is to blame. It's taken far too long to change. For years we see the trend. So many lives are shattered here. It's simply got to end. What will it take to fix the crime? Some minds will have to bend. Our Congress is to blame. They care more for their pocketbooks than saving precious lives. They're callous, cruel, and thoughtless, then they tell us facts of lies. Too many times they shirk their jobs while countless people die. Our Congress is to blame. Please do something, that woman cried. Her child had just been lost. Who can watch and turn their heads at such a tragic cost? They've got to get a spine to change, or out the door they're tossed. Our Congress is to blame. The shooters strike us everywhere. There is no place we're spared. At concert schools and theaters, they have us running scared. We must have our voices heard, and hope enough have cared. Our Congress is to blame. Now we have a president who turns his head away with empty words that just fool some, but nothing smart to say. Is government for the people when the young and old must pay? Our Congress is to blame. Get those, you can harmonize if you want. Get those crazies off the street, remove big guns and kill. They get them in all kinds of ways and shoot them off at will. High-powered ones are all around to cause such damage still. Our Congress is to blame. You think that change would happen after Columbine and others? Sandy Hook and Virginia Tech left grieving dads and mothers. Whole communities are devastated, our sisters and our brothers. Our Congress is to blame. I love the harmony. The latest one in Florida is causing so much pain. It's much too late for laissez-faire, it's just a crying shame. If nothing happens once again, mass bloodshed still remains. Our Congress is to blame. Thanks for staying, Lori. The other one is move to amend. I don't know if you want to hear it. Yes, no? Maybe so? All right. It's called Dark Dirty Money.
Next meeting.
You sure?
Sure, we need some, it's gonna be an action, it's gonna be a night of action. This will help us with our night of action.
That's up to you. All righty. I'll put it. It's good, and I may not be here next month.
You better do it.
Okay, Dark Dirty Money. Just go for it. It's quicker than the other one. And it's not a sing-along. Dark dirty money isn't funny. Into the swamp it flows. Where it comes from or the purpose, we are not supposed to know. Must be citizens united. What an awful nasty rule. Just to cheat at each election. The selection isn't cool. Gotta change this rotten practice. Let us bring it to an end. That is why we're here to tell you we must move to amend. Corporations can't be people. What a trick they pulled on us. It goes on till we stop it with a bold and mighty fuss. Takes convincing those that matter, use their power to make it fair. For the voter make sure who gets elected, better outcomes we will find. Corporate bullies with their slick tricks and our voices we must rail. Let them know that we won't buy it. Our democracy's not for sale. Woo! Woo! Thank you for listening.
We'll have some cookies back here, people, and some water. Please help yourself.
Please eat the cookies.
I do.
If you don't eat the cookies, we're gonna have to take them home.